Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is a massive topic. It spans many well-known characters, the largest threat we've known yet, and even how the light and the void may eventually share a common enemy. Pretty crazy, I know. Now, Before the Storm is surprisingly undead focused, especially in regards to Calia Menethil, who could become one of the most important characters in the lore because something truly special happens to her in that book. Now, Before the Storm is available on today's sponsor, Audible US, where you can get it for free and keep it for life with their free trial. The link to that is down below in the description box. So, the old gods, they whisper madness in the ears of mortals. They win by corrupting powerful beings and turning their power against them. That is their strategy. So far, almost everything seems to be susceptible, mainly mortal creatures, especially those who are made of flesh, like us. The old gods kind of work for the Void Lords. Void Lords are mysterious, but it seems like they are beings of the void, and not really that they are the void, much how like the Naru are beings of the light, but they're not the light itself. After all, light and void are pretty much established as being fundamental forces of creation, kinda like the fantasy version of the Big Bang. The upcoming struggle is one that is very fundamental. It essentially is a looming doom for the universe. Remember that between the Legion's crusade and the old god infestation, like universe-wide, Azeroth is kind of the last place left. Yup, the fate of the universe sits in the hands of idiots like you and me. But let's get into the meat of this video. Really something that has been hinted at for a long time. It's been poked and prodded at by the community, and it seems to be progressing in Battle for Azeroth. Not to tease you too much, but in the same expansion, they're giving Uther a new tomb with 2 seemingly secret passages, and they've also created one of the first light-based undeads that we've ever seen. Anyway, from what we can tell so far, being undead does at the very least make you quite resistant to the manipulation of the void. Now, what's interesting is that there's actually varying types of undeath. In WoD, we see Shadow, which is the type of magic powered by void, that it can be used to animate corpses. We know that, of course, necromantic magic works. In BFA, we see a light undead, and of course the Fel can animate corpses as well. It seems that the state of undeath is what gives resistance to void whisperings, perhaps regardless of the type, so maybe necromantic and wholly created undead would both be resistant, which is of course very interesting now that we are getting more light-based undead potentially. Now, we've got a few data points for this resistance. I'm going to include 2 in this video, and the rest will be linked below. So first, there's a passage from Chronicle to read. As a paladin, Arthas had always sought to bring order and justice to Azeroth. That desire remained, but it was now far more twisted than ever before. A world ruled by undead would have no more injustice, no more wars, no more mortal flaws. Perhaps most importantly to the Lich King, he believed his scourge would be far more capable of defending Azeroth against the threats that would try to conquer it. He observed the awakening of Cthulhu and the Burning Legion's attempts to launch other attacks on Azeroth. Neither the demons nor the powers of the void would rest until they controlled the world. A fractured world constantly beset by skirmishes between the Alliance and the Horde would simply not be prepared for another incursion. The big bit there, mortal flaws, such as the susceptibility to corruption and the alluring whispers of the void, something that Arthas was pretty much immune to, as evidenced by Yogg-Saron's failure to exert influence upon him and the antagonistic relationship between the two. Remember, Arthas's armor, weapon, and the whole structures of that entire area, they were made out of the blood of an old god, yet he was still not touched. We'll move on to his successor in a bit. The next data point is something very recent, and really we need only look at how the Void Whispers react to Sylvanas. They seemingly go into a frenzy, threatening to pierce through the mental wall that Alleria has placed around them. The Void is threatened by the undead. Why? Well, because they seem to be the group of beings that are the most resistant to it. I would hypothesize that the imperfect attachment of body and soul are the reason why the undead have this resistance, but that's just a theory. The other theory on why there is so much hatred, and I'll talk about this towards the end of this video, is that we know that light and void are a duality. Death seems to be something else. Death is sort of entropic, and it could be that this entropic force is what is seen as the ultimate evil, as referred to by the Void. But again, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So with that in mind, when you examine modern World of Warcraft, we see so many relevant things. First, Blizzard are putting more time into their undead characters, and they're just exploring undeath a lot more. Second, they're making the Void increasingly important. Third, they are highlighting the interaction between the two. So, that's the lay of the land. Let's see how all of this is progressing and what it could actually mean for the game. And we're going to kick it off with Sylvanas Windrunner, of course, and also Bwonsamdi. After all, Sylvanas has really acted as the catalyst for a lot of this. Her appointment as War Chief was really strange, both to the players of the game and canonically to the citizens of the Horde. Vol'jin did say, "Many will not understand." Remember that at the time of that cinematic, they were planning for Sylvanas to have a larger role in Legion, likely relating to her core drive of maintaining the Forsaken people. So it's possible that some of the intended Legion plot points will actually occur in Battle for Azeroth, and looking at the beta, that seems to be the case. So Vol'jin is pretty much saying that people will not understand. He is therefore implying that he does understand. Why? Well, because he has access to more information than most of the in-the-know people on Azeroth, and of course also the player character. So, what information does Vol'jin have access to, and who is it from? Well, he says spirits, and that's likely the Loa. Of all the Loa, Vol'jin was closest to Bwonsamdi, the Loa of Death. While he appears as a troll, Bwonsamdi states that he precedes the trolls, which is important because the trolls are one of the first post-Black Empire races on the planet, so super ancient. Now, the way things work with him is that the souls of dead trolls go to Bwonsamdi, and he gets more powerful the more souls are in his care. Yes, care. That's sort of how he self-describes what he does with souls, but we do know that the souls are not consumed. They actually can be communed with by the living, something that Bwonsamdi can facilitate, often for a bit of a price. Now, that's who he is, but what information could he possibly have? Why would he think that Sylvanas is right for the job? What would Bwonsamdi fear? Well, while we're off in Argus, the blood god Gahun is awakening in Nazmir, and the blood trolls are making moves. These things threaten the Loa, of course, as we know with many plots. I don't want to spoil things, but Loa are quite often sacrificed for power. So, sure, Bwonsamdi might want the Horde, but why Sylvanas particularly? Well, Bwonsamdi is bound to know about the Void situation and the resistance of undead people to it. Surely it would make sense for the leader of the Horde to be resistant to the Void, and perhaps Bwonsamdi sees something coming that we do not. I think a lot of this gains credence because of Vol'jin, because if anyone is worthy of our trust, it is Vol'jin. For Vol'jin to have been convinced to put Sylvanas on the throne, I really think we have to believe that he believed that it was of vital importance. But if we were to boil this purely just down to the essentials, we can be quite sure that the Loa of Death essentially placed one of the most important, powerful undead beings on Azeroth on the throne of the Horde. We don't know exactly why, but this is a data point that goes along with how we know that the undead are resistant to the Void. Next, though, we're going to talk about Calia Menethil. Calia is the sister of Arthas, and she was heavily involved in the Priest Order Hall, and in Before the Storm, she kind of meets her end. She is shot and killed by Sylvanas, only to be resurrected by a Naru, along with the help of Vel and Anduin. It isn't beyond the light to fully resurrect someone, but Sarah says this: Calia Menethil will be freed from the pains of the living, from the nightmares that once rent her heart. And then she goes on to say, light and dark, Forsaken priest and human priest, together you shall bring her back as the light and she herself would have her be. Calia is then brought back as a new type of undead. The characters present were not really sure what Calia now is, and even the experience of resurrecting felt different. Anduin normally would feel like he was channeling the light, but in this case, he says that it feels like he was just a vessel used by the light. Sarah mentions light and dark, and if you look around Netherlight Temple, it's a place of light and dark. If you look into Sarah's past, there's light and dark. Something's very different about the resurrection of Calia. We don't know where this plot point's going to go. It was at the end of the book, and so far, BFA doesn't really cover it, but it's got to be extremely important that they have introduced a new type of light undead. So currently, Sylvanas leads one group of undead, Bolvar leads another group of undead, and Calia one day may lead yet more undead. Calia's brother was aware of the Void and the weaknesses of mortals to it, so you have to wonder if she one day will find out, since she's at the Netherlight Temple, one of the most cutting-edge places for research into light and void. So that's what's up with Arthas' sister, but what about Arthas' mentor, Uther, and his successor, Bolvar? Well, Uther first. Uther is dead, but he has constantly appeared as a spirit, both from Frostmourne during Wrath of the Lich King and as a ghost at his tomb. Something might be happening Battle for Azeroth though, as his tomb has just been revamped by Blizzard. I covered this in the most recent news video, and around his statue there are multiple light seals as well as 2 locked doors, and they both lead underground. We have no idea why Uther would be back in the story, but it seems unlikely that Blizzard would do this revamp if they didn't plan to use it. So could he, like Calia, return to the world as a light undead? Hard to know, but it doesn't seem beyond the realms of possibility based on the lore that they're trying to establish. Next, let's talk about Bolvar, and at first his daughter, because she's actually been located. Very soon after arriving on Borealis, we find that one of the new characters was basically shipped off to Culturas as a child, and it is his daughter. So that's one of his only known living descendants, is just currently a character that we interact with. She doesn't know the true fate of her father. Very few people do. Tyrion would have taken that to the grave, Jaina and Varian know, but they agreed not to tell Anduin. Sylvanas probably knows, as does the Ebon Blade, but that's pretty much it. Blizzard could have just had Talia be a new character. There was no need for her to be Bolvar's daughter, unless they wanted to use that as a plot point in the future. Now, as for Bolvar herself, well, Bolvar is very concerned about others misusing the undead, particularly Sylvanas, but the effects of being the Lich King, they're kind of darkening him. One only has to look at how he has acted over the course of Legion. He even talks about having plans for the Ebon Blade should the player character die. Arthas was aware that the undead were resistant to the void and the inherent benefits of not being a living, mortal being. Bolvar almost certainly knows this too, but we're not really sure what's going on inside the helm. Arthas was never able to fully destroy Ner'zhul. He was only able to push him away, such that he was a distant yet constant whale. It is possible that Arthas could exert influence on Bolvar, allowing him to communicate his plan to protect the planet from external threats, or at least letting Bolvar in some knowledge. I've talked about Bolvar quite a bit, and I'm not going to reiterate all that, but right now he definitely seems like a morally grey character, in a true sense of the word. Yes, he is on our side, but if you look at what he does in Legion, it's morally dubious, and there's also some conspiracies about him and Yogg-Saron, but I don't think they're worth getting into now. But overall, Bolvar is important. Bolvar is leading the undead. They have introduced his daughter, so this is another undead character who has been reestablished a bit more in Legion, and they're adding more to him in BFA, which would suggest they have something in store for us. Alright, let's get into some conclusions. How does this actually tie together? Right now, it's more a case of being a broad theme that's being played out across a few different storylines. We see Calia be brought back as an undead, spurred on by Sarah. Sarah is a very interesting Naru because she is one of the few who has been brought back from the void, so I wonder, has this given her greater wisdom and perspective than Zira? So a Naru, who's very familiar with the Void, causes the creation of a new type of undead. That's kind of interesting. We then see the Void react to Sylvanas when it comes across her through Ilaria. It's a violent reaction, one that is far more vitriolic than normal. The Void says that Sylvanas seeks the death of all things. So did Arthas. This death and subsequent undeath of all things in order to resist the existential threats that we now know effectively are sort of universe-ending. The Void later on goes on to say that Sylvanas is a violation and that she serves the true enemy, so who is the true enemy of the Void? Well, one might think it's the light, but as we are constantly told, without the light, there can be no shadow. They are duality. Plus, there's no way that Sylvanas serves the light, so something else is the true enemy. Now, death is on the cosmic forces chart as a separate thing to light, shadow, order, disorder, and life. Death is described as being the ultimate sort of entropic force. Well, entropy in the real world is the tendency from order to disorder. Entropy eventually will lead to the heat death of the universe. Shadow and light are forces of creation. When they interact, stuff comes out. So could it be that the true enemy of both shadow and light is actually death? If so, then there is a whole new direction for World of Warcraft's lore to explore. What lies behind the force of death? I don't know. I'd love to hear your speculation in this one. It's kind of pushing some of the limits. If Light and Void shared an enemy, then that could very well lead to just different storylines and different flavors of the game than what we currently imagine. So that's it for the video, and thank you to audible.com for sponsoring the video. They are the largest audiobook platform, and you can get a free audiobook of your choice by clicking the link in the video description. Before the Storm is currently available in the US, and if you're outside of there, I would actually recommend giving Vol'jin Shadows of the Horde a shot, because there's some Bwonsamdi in there too. Now, the book is yours for free for life, even if you cancel. They're giving you a freebie. They hope you like the service and stay along, and as always, sponsor earnings go straight towards the game development work where they pay for staff wages, which I think is a pretty damn awesome thing. So, thank you very much for watching this video. A big thank you to everyone over on Patreon. Their support is just wonderful for the channel. And of course, there's a new Patreon poster, which, this month's is super awesome, so you can check that out too. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.